Good morning, Cape Town, home, Africa. I love this continent. I was born here, born in Zimbabwe. So we're just going to have, if you don't mind, it's more just thoughts and dialogue and asking. I mean, I don't know what you think when you think of Afrofuturism, but I had no idea what to think. So what I thought I would do, I just started asking friends from all over the world. I'm, fortunate position to be working between here and the States in commercials, movies, TV, which is fantastic, which was a dream. And just before I walked onto stage, I got an email, a text from John Singleton, director, Boys in the Hood, blah, blah, blah. So he says, because I've just done a TV show called Snowfall, and he created the show, he's one of the execs, so he sent me a thing saying, hey man, love your episode, just watched it. So I said, how do you feel? Then I went right into, what do you think of when you hear Afrofuturism? I've got a talk to do, dude. Depends, he says. Did you fly home yet? Are you finished with the cut? About to go on stage to speak on Afrofuturism, would love a line from you to include. Well, you're putting me on notice. So I said, I know, your timing was perfect. So his answer, asking me about Afrofuturism, is like asking one of the ancient Egyptian architects, how are we going to build these pyramids? And why are we building them in the first place? And he says, it's a moment where our origins meet the possibilities of our people. It's where fantasy stops and reality takes hold and goes rather than imagination. It's all of the above. I'm not an expert, seriously. I just love making films. I love telling stories. As a child in Zim, there was so much going on in the 70s, the war. And for me, images were so important. It was a violent time, a joyful time. Grew up in a home that was really difficult at the best of times. And one of my memories I remember is sitting on my mom's lap, waiting for my dad, because we had curfew in Zim, and watching, when you watch bullet trace across the sky, and no one could eat, dad is not coming home. But in my head, that was fireworks, because you had to escape somewhere. You know what I mean? And all those things, so movies and things like that became these escape places, because then when you're waiting for dad or something wrong, you just sit in front of the TV, And movies became, for me, that place where you could escape what was going on around you. I remember growing up, praying every day when I went to bed, waking up, dreaming that you would wake up white. And why? Because the kids used to grab my hair and say, oh, there's clock springs. Clock springs, and make fun of it. So it's like, oh, blonde hair is a premium thing. But, so you have this thing inside of you. So in my head, I just like, how do you change this? How do you change this? And so telling stories for me became this thing of, you know what? I'm going to tell my story. I don't care what anyone says. My story matters. So you're looking at a guy who grew up with a big dream. And when you look at this logo here, this is a logo for my wife and I's film company. And there's a story to this. We moved to LA in 2005, and I did a film called Pride with Terrence Howard and all that sort of stuff. You're the it boy in Hollywood. You're arriving from Africa. You're exotic. It's great. Do the movie with the studio. You travel and you're in jets and you do the Hollywood life. And then the strike happened. And then something else happened. Then something else happened. Then something else happened. And you're looking for coins in your seats to put gas. And then your agent calls you, Idris Elba wants to meet you. I'm like, oh, okay, how do I get there? Okay, we found $5.83, put it in the thing. You drive, and he wants to meet at L'Hermitage. I'm like, really? Okay, park 2 miles away because it's free, so get there an hour early. And then you go to the meeting, and you're praying, let's just have water. So if you're foreign, please save our water. And that's serious. Please save our water. And I'm sitting there and he's ordering champagne and all sorts. And you just like, you want to throw up. But that's where I was at. And 2012, we launched this company, to much fanfare. And the logo for me was, a friend of mine saw a picture of me and created this logo, and my heart was always, Shekinah speaks of the light of God and, the glory of God and light. And I was like, I want to take the light of Africa to the world. That's my heart. I want us as Africans to send our light to the world. We launched this thing, and guess what? This was going to be the moment. I remember at the premiere, at this thing, phoning my mom at that moment, saying from this stage like this, Mom, I'm in Hollywood, this is happening, and it all went swimmingly. Terrible. We lost everything. Moved back to Africa and spent the first 6 months in a little room with my wife and 2 kids. Nothing. And I remember one night going to the bathroom, waking up in this little thing and just thinking, wow, from the jets to here. And I felt this thing, I'll just take a picture. One day you'll remember this. And for me, that was one of those moments I just realized life is so fleeting. What's your voice? What do you want to do? And that's when really I got my first job doing commercials and slowly built up my work again, and then I found my voice. As an African, I'm not going to try and be a Hollywood director. Who am I? What do I want to do? And I just pursued that work. That's all I did. And people started defining it. Anyway, so it's not all rosy, but I'm standing in front of you as this kid that had the dream, and things have turned around. And as Africans, I think we have this resilience. So some of the things that people have said about Afrofuturism, because as I said, I'm not an expert, I just ask people. Trends, technology, and design in future can be predicted because they're carried by the mass of humanity. But for a human being, an individual, the future is unpredictable and uncertain. Who knows what tomorrow holds for me or for you? Nowhere is the fleeting nature of life better understood than on the African continent. And so tomorrow becomes a luxury that few can afford to apply their time, energy, and attention to, which is why in Africa, the future is now. And if tomorrow comes, then it's an unwarranted blessing that I grasp with open arms and a grateful heart. Afrofuturism is therefore carpe diem, to survive and thrive now. Dr. Michael Mole. This is the Design Indaba did this book, I think commissioned a book, and what I loved about this cover is Africa Rising. This way, what's the imagery how is Hollywood portrayed as Blood Diamonds? For me, is not the full, complete Africa. Actually, as a filmmaker, you start to realize what's the lens that we're looking at things of. Because if you think of Blood Diamonds, actually, it was Solomon's story, but because Hollywood says black people don't sell movies, they're to have the protagonist turn him to white. So when I came back from Wakanda on Saturday, I disagreed. And so we want to change the imagery that's out there. If you look up African art, all you see is the typical Africa safari thing. So for me, this is what's happening on the ground and where my heart started to go. And jumped on a journey with the native VML team. I think they are here somewhere. And we did, and what was great is they came with the concept that we've got Kulichana and we want to go and do this collaboration. And for me, it was never, I was born in Zimbabwe, I've lived here, I've lived in the UK, I spent time in Canada and the US. So for me, in terms of Africa, I've always seen not just as a Zimbabwean or a South African, but as an African. And so we did this Pan-African thing, and our first thing that we did was like, let's try and find something fresh. And the result of that was this. There we go.
Africa is on fire.
Ghana for Maya ready. You know what time it is? Where you cool the China? But they be palm better. Oh! culture. Reported live from a lighthouse in Accra. Here to tell you Africa no longer riding shotgun. Jesus made wine, so I turn my water to vodka. What's running through my mind with a hunger to unlock. Fire burning inside me, Jagale Blanca. Who gave you that conquer? Now free us, see us, conquer. Salute you, don't salute, I check the rules. Sabaudi, we gon' have to vagabond. As Abudi, I'ma have to bless the youth. If the youth be absolute, we ready to move. Smooth seas only built a soft mariner. It's too real out here, can you handle the God-given? What little that we bringing from Cellular, now we singing. It's only the beginning. God-given, God-given, God-given. Only the beginning.
This is a revolution.
Oh! This is where Ali and Judge rumble. The world now got us twisted. Africa ain't no jungle. I think it's time now we made them listen. We are creators, we all created here. The fire to eliminate this here. Connect the dots from the north and the southern hemisphere. Flip the anger, the passion, the pain, the pleasure, cause change is here. God-given, God-given, God-given. It's only the beginning.
What are you waiting for?
Africa ain't no jungle. It's time we made them listen. That's really, that to me, that was a life-changing moment doing that, because it really expressed everything I was feeling, you know. And also in advertising, there's always these words, aspirational, and those BS things. I'm like, you know, you go into a township, it's like, let's clean it up, and like, this is where we live. Okay, let's stop trying to hide it. And for me, it's like, So we did that, and that was, for me, was really, I thought I found my voice. And from that moment on, I don't have to try and be anything else. Because for me, aspiration is an attitude. You can have someone in a township, etc., and they still, like you saw that old lady that was sitting there. I mean, we were walking past, I saw her, and the way she looked at me, and we went to her and asked her if we'd shoot, and, you know, we did that shot, and I was like, man, that's Mother Africa. And when we went back the second time to do, I'll show you just now, the follow-up to it, I went back because I wanted to show her what we had done, and her daughter told me she had passed. So that was really sad, because I wanted to include her again in this next round. And for me, that's the joy of Africa. It's all around you. You don't need to hide it, just as it is. So for me, that's carpe diem, you know, as Michael Moll said, I feel I relate to that. Molefi Tulo, a creative director and a good friend, said, hey man, people really struggled with this concept. Hey man, been thinking about the question. For me, it's a modern take on our philosophies, beliefs, aspirations, and image that's free of European, Asian, American influence, and really doesn't need it. And then The lead actor from the show Snowfall, he sent this to me. I believe Afrofuturism perfectly merges the past and the present of African culture in order to birth a brighter future. And then my wife says this. She's right here. Say hello to everyone, darling. So, our people and the planet's future with Africa at the helm instead of the usual superpowers we see. Africa leading the way in design, culture, and technologies of the future. Tsaliso, another good friend, ECD Cape Town, says, whoa, here goes. You can hear by the start, everyone's like, what are you talking about? For me, it's about Africa reclaiming its place at the cutting edge of civilization, much like it was in ancient times. It's kind of back to the future movement for the continent. That's cool. I like that. And Saliso and I, we did a project together, which also was, he came with this project and they had this beautiful voice, you know, the voiceover, and he said to me, just fly. You know, this brand wanted to rebrand, and they said to me, fly, what would you do? And this is what came out of it.
I see you. You're the guy that gets up in the morning and says, Siyabangena, pushy peshi. I'll put him at all. Shonako. I see you. I see you. Whoa, whoa. Put your shoulders to the grind. You make each second of every hour count. I see you, my brother. I see you. When I was there, I'm a jet panda. I see you. Then I commence with the plan mark. Not only a bull, I see you. Giving your all. Because a lava fambe moye. To raise those behind you to greater heights. Tell us down, my sister. When you begin the bazako, 24/7.
It's gonna be a good Monday.
You go all in. No half measures. No 50-50. 9 to 5 and 5 to 9. Aye. Cause to you, failure's next. To the people who make every day a success. I see you. 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 I see you.
So that job to me was amazing because we said, let's just look at not just the designers and the cool people but let's look at a taxi driver, let's look at a shop owner. How do we make them heroic? Because they hold up this continent as much as, yes, the artists are out there in the public eye, but, in this country, especially if you think of the taxi drivers, I mean, they keep our economy going. When they strike, we got problems. So I just wanted to show those people in a heroic way, etc. And for me, that feels like I wanted to see my mom look good, if that makes sense. Go that you look good, and that's why for me that shop. My dad had a corner shop, so it's all these childhood memories just keep coming back in different ways. So we had fun doing that, and just another definition. My daughter. My beautiful daughter. She said to me, a mixed-race teenager living in a world that is slowly starting to see Africa for the beautiful, innovative continent that it is. Afrofuturism makes me think of change and recognition and of Africa putting itself first on the creative and development front. The word Afrofuturism gives me an incredible sense of hope for our continent. That's not my brain, that's her. And then So Osborne Macharia, who spoke last year, has become a key collaborator for me on the first Absolute campaign. When we were looking for other, we had Cooley, and then we thought about musicians. And my thinking was, well, let's bring other artists too, like graffiti artists and fashion people, etc. And one of the people that, for me, whose work had inspired me, who to me was really, for me, my person that started doing work that is Afrofuturism. And Osborne, says it's an artistic style, either visual or audio, that integrates historical elements, present cultural context, and future aspirations of black people through the use of fantasy, narrative, culture, and identity. It's a body of work that connects black people both in the continent and in the diaspora with one voice saying, this is who we are. But again, it's very hard to put Afrofuturism in its own category because it's a raging fire. Come on, baby. And Osborne is a genius. I mean, he's mad and the most gentle, beautiful guy. And the work that he's done. So Black Panther, he phones me in December and says, Sunu, I've just, Ava DuVernay tweeted about the job him and I had just done, the latest Absolute, it's coming. They phoned him, Disney phoned and said, we want you to do your interpretation of Wakanda, Black Panther. And this is what this guy produces. I mean, it's like, just to see Africans like this, it's insane. And this is Osborne's work. And for me, this is, I don't know, I've dreamt of seeing work like that. And this is for me how the world, we were kings here. Kings and queens, and that's what, for me, the work that is exciting me. A good friend, David Oyelowo, we're working on some projects together. He started in Selma. We met 2 years ago when he was in South Africa, 3 years ago, I think, doing the Queen of Katwe. This friendship just developed over time, and once again, he's British Nigerian, so I'm just starting to see these dots over the last few years connect. And David said, Afrofuturism to me is telling the truth of Africa's past, Africa's pre-colonized state, which I think is what Osborne's work is. Africa as it would have been and could be without the rape and pillage it has endured. It's Africa, it will be having been nursed back to wholeness. And then I was just trying to put it together, and in my head, I just thought it's putting yourself into everything you do, bringing in your unique and specific voice to define and redefine. Because for me, there's a redefining. Whether you're, for example, teachers, if you look at the history books, what they've told us, that needs to change. How we as Africans see ourselves and how the world has presented us in arts, culture and entertainment, business, education, religion, media, politics, government, family. It is boldly moving forward without shame of where you came from or of being African, no matter what your sphere of influence or area of expertise. And no matter who's in front of you, your voice matters and demands to be heard as an African. And for me, what was interesting, when I was in LA this last few weeks doing Snowfall, I remember walking into the table read. We had a table read, and it's like 30, 40 people, the writers, the crew, and it was, as I walked in, I looked around, and everyone started clapping. I mean, I'm like, who's this dude from Africa? But there was this collective excitement, for the actors. We've got a director from Africa, and the energy was just palpable, and they were clapping. Now I'm walking around trying to find a seat. Everyone's looking at me. It's like, no, you're at the head of the table, okay? And I'm sitting at the head of the table next to Tommy Shlami, the chairman of the DGA. And I just looked at this, and for a moment just sat silently. And like, this is great to be in a room like this, where we're telling stories, but we can do this. We don't need someone to give us permission. And for me, it was a great moment because now everyone is looking to you for direction. And I realized if I hadn't lost everything and come back to Africa, I would have been thinking very differently in that room. When I walked into that room for the first time, I'm like, I'm bringing something to the table. I'm African. This is who I am. This is the kind of work I've been doing. And if you are in that room and you've signed the contract, it means they want something from you. People expect you to bring something. And so for me, that was a beautiful moment. And you heard what John Singleton said. He created the show. They're all so happy, etc. And I just realized. And what was nice for me in directing, and what's interesting, is telling stories to actors sometimes to try and get them to connect with a scene, and telling African stories. And you can just see I was like, how do I bring Africa into this? And I remember the one moment trying to explain a scene. I'm passionate about wildlife, and especially lions. And I remember I just started telling stories of the dynamics of a lion pride. And the actor just looked at me, the actors, because it was a scene with all the actors. So I just told them how the dynamics work. And they all just looked at me and said, we got it. Because everyone realized who's the alpha male, who's this, who's this. Everyone got it. And I realized I'm taking Africa to the world in that way. Going to the conclusion. So the first Absolute campaign did so well for us, and Native and Cooley and Egg for myself, for everyone. And when we first did it, I'd said to the team, we're sitting at Native, and I said to the guys, I want to do African superheroes. And I remember Mel, the client, looking at me, was like, you're crazy. But she's amazing. She's like, let's go for it, But a year or so later, we end up doing it. And it was, once again, in Africa, we create on the go, It's like, and for me, I'm always like, we were in this, Agroboboshi, the electronic dump heap. I'm like, that's where we go. We get stuff, and the costume department puts it together, and then we see, I'm walking past the place, I'm like, oh, that's where we do the biker scene. You just use what's in front of you because it is so beautiful and visual. So we did this campaign, and these were the posters for the superheroes that we did. There's Osborne Masharia. Put him in front of the camera. But if you look at all this wardrobe, these are things we were finding and just creating, because in Africa it's there for us. And I've stopped trying to be fancy. I'm like, what's in front of me? Let me work with that. So we did this amazing campaign. We created our own mythology around these characters. And Osborne did the photography, but he also featured in the advert. Anyway, just to end off before I play the last videos, I just want to say, I've had a lot of negative people, because, I'm this kid from Africa who dreamt of making movies for the world. And there's people out there that are going to tell you a lot of BS. And if you are one of those people, I'm like, let's stop trying to crush people's dreams, Just because you don't want to go that direction, don't stop someone else going. I think as a continent, if we collectively just uplift, it's like a rising tide raises all ships, right? Not just one boat. All the boats come up with the tide. So for me, the more we see success, I am so over the moon with Black Panther. And I waited. It's a game changer. And being in Hollywood at this time was amazing. And the opportunity, it's wide open. And I went with my daughter, and when Danai Gurira came on, she's this warrior, my daughter, and we crying and crying. I cried in that sequence with the sand. Anyway, so my daughter says, Dad, that's us. That's us. Never seen it. You've dreamt of doing that. So that's my thing is, I'm excited to take our stories to the world, and I think every single one of us has just pick your little patch, and that's where you tell your story. Whether you're a teacher, a banker, whatever it is, you don't have to try and do it in anyone else's style, because there's lots of different faces, and it's nice to see different faces, not just one. And so let me just play this for you. And this is how, for me, it was the conclusion of this journey of Afrofuturism. Starting there, now we're going to go to the next phase, which I don't know where that is.
is on fire.
Ghana for Maya ready. You know what time it is? Where you cool the China? But they be palm better. Oh! Reported live from a lighthouse in Accra. Here to tell you Africa no longer riding shotgun. Jesus made wine, so I turn my water to vodka. What's running through my mind with a hunger to Bolaka? Fire burning inside me, Jagale Blanca. Who gave you that conker? Now be up, see us, conker. Salute you, don't salute. I check the news about who we gon' have to vagabonds. As I'm Moody, I'ma have to bless the youth. If the youth be absolute, we ready to move. Smooth seas only built a soft mariner. It's too real out here. Can you handle the God-given? What little that we bringing from say little now we singing. It's only the beginning. God-given. 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 Only the beginning.
This is where Ali and George rumble. The world now got us twisted. Africa ain't no jungle. I think it's time now we made them listen. We are created and not created here. They stole our shine with the fire to illuminate this here. Connect the dots with the northern and southern. Flip the anger, the passion, the pain, the pleasure, cause change is here. Go on! Go on! See! God-given, God-given, God-given.
It's only the beginning.
Yo, 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 yo.